Pope Leo XIV has celebrated his first Mass as the leader of the Catholic Church inside the Vatican's Sistine Chapel today. The Cardinals, who elected him as pontiff, participated in the service, which was held just one day after the conclave drew to a close. Let's now bring in SABC News correspondent Trent, who's in Rome, joining us live from the Vatican. Trent, it's so good to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure some element of jubilation as white smoke bellowed, signaling, of course, that agreement on the election of a new pope. Just how was the first Mass homily under Pope Leo?
Well, I think many people here are still becoming accustomed to the idea of an American pope. It is, of course, the first time in history that the Catholic Church has had an American in the top job. But what many people are now starting to understand is that his background is a little bit more complex than it may first seem. He spent 40 years, most of his career, actually working as a missionary and a priest in Peru. He speaks Spanish, Italian, as well as English. And so for many of the South American pilgrims here, and they are in big number, I can tell you, they are kind of claiming him as their own as well. And I think there's plenty of joy, I think, to be shared around both between the South Americans and the North Americans over this. And of course, here's a historic moment. We saw the new papal leader lead a Mass earlier today in the Sistine Chapel, the very same room where just 24 hours ago that voting was taking place. 24 hours later, he was holding a Mass there where he spoke about the need for the Church to walk together and to also bring light to many of the dark nights around the world, as he described it. He also spoke in English briefly, highly unusual for a pope to do. Italian is the official papal language, but the new pontiff wanted, I think, to use the opportunity to speak several languages in order to try and increase the outreach to some of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics.
And just on that note, of course, Trent, the Pope, as you rightfully pointed out, being Chicago-born, we understand that President Donald Trump already celebrated his papacy as a great honor for our country, as he says. But of course, with speculation about whether or not Trump had any influence in this decision is also arrived. But also on the other side, Trump provocateurs there declaring him as anti-Trump. I'm wondering just how Romans, in particular, as you mentioned earlier on, the South Americans are actually reacting to these speculations on the ground.
Well, what we are learning about this new pontiff is quite significant and interesting because he has a bit of a social media background, posting quite often on X, formerly known as Twitter. And the indications are he shares many of the same views as his predecessor, Pope Francis. We know that the two were very close. Of course, Pope Francis was an Argentinian pope, and so there is that South American connection there. He has spoken out, for example, against climate change, saying it's enough time for words, more action is needed. He spoke at the time during the COVID-19 pandemic, encouraging people to get vaccinations. He even butted heads somewhat with US Vice President, I should say, J.D. Vance over the treatment of refugees. And he also was a strong and vocal advocate for the Black Lives Matter movement. So a lot of the indications are that he may be a similar pope in many ways to Pope Francis, someone not afraid to put their head above the parapet and to speak about controversial issues that may rub some politicians the wrong way. Church insiders are saying he is seen as a bit of a man in the sort of middle ground, someone that can bring both sides of the church together. But he certainly has got a big task ahead and quite big shoes to fill, I suppose one could say, after the big legacy that his predecessor, Pope Francis, left behind.
Trent, he has also warned against their choosing technology, money, success, power or pleasure over the Christian faith. And of course, reassuring many, as you've just rightly pointed out, that he will be following very closely on the footsteps of late Pope Francis. That is SABC News' Trent joining us in Rome at the Vatican.